All right, we're live. Jeremy, how you doing?
I'm doing all right.
All right.
Having a nice night. It's
What were you doing before this?
today.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm getting ready to change jobs at the end of the Korean school year at the end of February. So I'm trying to use up as much food in my pantry as I can and start to get my stuff packed up. See how
Oh, you're
many of my
moving.
old board game collection I can get rid of. Trying to declutter.
Gotcha.
How about
You're
yourself?
saying you're staying there in Korea though. You're just moving to a different place.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Myself, what I was doing about 20 minutes ago was sleeping. So yeah, I didn't do anything earlier today. Yesterday I
Well,
finished reading 1984 for the first time.
Oh, I saw your Facebook post about that. Yeah, it's not the novel is not particularly fresh in my mind, but when my parents were visiting in September, um, while I was at the apartment that I set up for them, uh, we watched the the film 1984 from I
Oh,
guess from the 50s because my dad, my dad told me that he had just chanced to see it on TV when he was about 10 or 11 years old, and it like existentially terrified him
oh,
watching
gotcha.
that movie as a kid.
Gotcha.
That
Yeah.
was my first. It was my first time seeing that filmed version.
Gotcha. Yeah, I haven't seen that. But yeah, the book was incredible on a few different levels. Like, I'm still wrapping my mind around the politics of it and the philosophy of it. The book within a book, I reread. I went back to it's like part 2, chapter 8 or something like that. There's uh, when he reads the book by the Goldstein
Mhm.
book. But separate from the politics, what blew my mind was just the writing structure of all of it. Like the detail on actions people would do, or just Winston's feelings on anything he would see, the like interactions with him and Julia. Like, even if the politics were completely gone and there wasn't an idea of what the
Mhm.
future would be like, it is just one of the best cases of writing I've ever seen. And it gave me chills. And yeah. So but yeah, you should reread it sometime and we should talk about it.
That's interesting. It's kind of a polarizing figure in a lot of respects, right? I've read and heard enough of Christopher Hitchens' um, admiration of Orwell and even modeling a lot of his style on Orwell and like describing himself as using a lot of the same kind of thought processes, I guess. And then I'm also familiar with Nabokov's disdain for Orwell in particular is like really representative of a kind of approach to literature that he didn't like.
Interesting. Huh.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's but I haven't read any Orwell since like early college.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so it's been a while.
Um, yeah, including essays or anything else.
Hmm.
So it's like in this hazy periphery, but yeah, I was freaked out by 1984 in high school for sure.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Pretty
Did you
neat.
have to read it for school?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't remember what year, but
I say have to. You get
I
to read it
kind of
for school.
remember like needing to have finished it and like finishing it semi speed reading during a lunch break or whatever, but then being kind of messed up by it for the rest of the day. Yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Alrighty. Well, let's go ahead and hop into our topic. We're going to talk about sentience, suffering, pleasure. Um, I There's so many ways we could look at the idea of sentience and consciousness and the difference between the two. But the first thing I want to just look at an idea of is okay, I think I mentioned this to you before, but let's say we just take something that isn't sentient, like a rock. Okay. And then if we just hypothetically bake in that this rock now can suffer, it has the ability to suffer, we can take away everything else. It doesn't have the ability to feel pleasure or to see anything, to feel any touch. It can just suffer, and it magically is made to suffer. We can walk past it, know that it's suffering. Let's say we hypothetically can press a button that would make it not suffer. I'm guessing the right thing to do, if it doesn't affect our lives in any other way, would be to make it not suffer. So what I'm trying to figure out when I think of sentience, and maybe the problem is that all the things that make up sentience and consciousness are so interlinked that you can't have parts without other parts. But is there anything of value outside of pleasure and suffering when it comes to sentience?
So you already at the end there hit on what my first response was going to be, that I think we have to start by asking whether it's even coherent to think that pleasure and pain might be added on to some system that doesn't differ in its physical function in any third-party observable way. And I'm strongly inclined toward the physicalist. Essentially, close to what I think is called the eliminativist position, that there is just nothing more to say than the physical structure and physical processes. Some physical processes are enormously complex, of course, but I generally don't think that you could have something that's identical to a rock from a third-person perspective, or in its function, in the sum of its physical properties and interactions, and add in something like suffering. That is another way of saying that is just that whatever class of things we call suffering in our natural languages, there's some sort of physical process, physical mechanism, right? So I don't, when we try to entertain that thought experiment, we really got to be careful that we don't equivocate. Are we trying to think of something that just might be metaphysically impossible, like something with no additional physical function to the rocks that we're familiar with, that experiences suffering, with something that's like, you might create a rock in a fantasy universe, which is metaphysically possible. It might not be, physically possible in our universe, but something that would be like close to the real world rocks, but have additional functions that constitute the suffering, right? Like some sort of sensory system, cognitive system that processes the external environment and creates goals, and then can have those goals frustrated. And so if you imagine something that looks like a rock, it's hard like a rock, maybe most other conscious beings have a lot of difficulty communicating with it, but if you probe its physical structure in the right way, you find out that it has these mechanisms of computation of consciousness that look like the kind of structures that we think of as and call suffering in the cognitive beings that we're familiar with, various animals, and then other fictional or hypothetical beings. I kind of got long-winded there, but I just think if you're asking, would you shut off suffering in this suffering rock, you got to be clear which of those two you're talking about. Something that could just be impossible and not even worth talking about from an ethical perspective, because the main thing to say is this: it's like metaphysically incoherent. The rock that's exactly like a rock, but has pain. We have to not even be in the domain of ethics at that point, because I don't even understand what that would mean. But if you're talking about, fantasy rock being that has some mechanism inside that's suffering from something, then shutting off the suffering is like one way to describe it, but it would inherently involve changing something about the physical mechanism of this fantasy rock being, right? So you couldn't just shut off the suffering. You would be shutting off some kind of function, and then that function is a function that's classified as suffering.
Gotcha.
Is basically the way I see it.
Okay, yeah, and that makes sense. What if we take it the opposite approach? What if we look at a hypothetical thing that is everything we think of when we think of sentience, but then we remove its ability to feel pleasure or pain, which again might be something that's incoherent, but maybe it's not.
It might be incoherent to remove the pleasure or pain. I think it is, without changing anything. Right?
Yeah. Well, like for example,
at all. But you might.
We could imagine something that's like maybe closer to like a plant type thing, but where it can move around, like it can have legs, and it meanders, and it has it can perceive various different things. It just can't have any wants or pleasure, pain, anything like that, but it has to walk to water to get its water or something like that. Because I just wonder if there's anything within sentience where we can start removing elements to go, this is one of the 10 things that makes something sentient, but it's not one of the things we care about. Or do you think everything that's within the definition of sentience and consciousness is so interlinked that you can't talk about them separately?
Oh, no. I mean, it's kind of what we do with our language all the time is carve up a causally interconnected world. I think we can do that with parts of our mind, and we do it every day. We definitely do it every day. We say like, I like walnuts and I want to get a new phone, and I like that guy, but I don't always trust him, and stuff like that. And all these things that we're doing are carving up pieces of minds, our own or others. And even the way we talk about minds, it's like we focus in on a subset of all the physical processes that are going on in a particular brain and body, and call that the mind. And we're just sort of like either like consciously or just implicitly ignoring a whole bunch of what's, as the metaphor goes, going on under the hood. And thinking of like the particular function of the car, like the driver wants to steer, so we think of the steering wheel, and then we think of the car turning. We probably think of the wheels too, but we don't think of everything going on between the steering wheel and the wheels. We just take that for granted in the way that we talk about minds and different like mental verbs and mental nouns. So I think, at least from a pragmatic, just from a everyday functional standpoint, sure, we can and we do carve up different aspects of cognition and what we call sentience. And then in terms of what we care about, you said what we care about. And I'm not sure whether you intended that to mean some kind of moral realist, what we ought to care about or what it's proper to care about, or like a descriptive, what the average human usually cares about, or what you and I like descriptively do care about.
Right. Yeah, no, that good point. And I think I kind of just mean in a sense there seems to be a typical way that humans feel about things. So I probably meant humans, while also realizing that that I don't view morality as subjective. So in another sense, I guess I mean myself, because we could come to the conclusion that me and you don't care about the same things. But yeah, just trying to figure out, I guess, for each of us what we care about.
So one thing we might talk about, that we've talked about aphantasia, that I've come to learn. I learned about it well into adulthood, after mistakenly thinking that basically everybody was like this, and this is the norm. And it is still pretty strange for me to consider that something like 97-98% of the people around me are doing this thing that it just seems like a category error to me, right? For people who don't know, there are these people like me who don't see anything when we close our eyes, when we quote unquote imagine something. There's nothing like visual, or different people vary in how extreme it is. But when I imagine, if you ask me to think about a very familiar song, it's nothing like actually hearing it in my head. I don't see things, hear things, smell things, touch, feel things in my head, basically at all. And that just seems normal to me, and I don't even really understand the concept of doing that. To me, what other people report doing, it just seems like a category error. Like for thinking about a horse to be like having a picture of a horse, like then to even ask the question, okay, you thought about a horse, now which direction was it facing, or what color was it? That just seems like nonsense. Like you're confusing looking at something or hallucinating something with thinking about something. That's like, I would just have said, that's just not what it means to think about something.
Yeah.
You're talking about something else, like that's different from just thinking about something. If it has a color, I mean, when it's a horse,
Yeah.
So the reason I brought that up is to think about value. We're talking about value of different aspects of sentience. So I think fairly often about why we typically why and how we typically feel like somebody's lost something inherently if they go blind, or even if they just are born blind. um and we don't, I mean, maybe you do. I don't think that I'm missing something for being aphantasic.
Oh,
I
I
don't want
definitely
to be.
do.
I don't
The
want to be phantasic.
You don't?
I definitely do not want to. What to me, sounds like I would describe as not being able to just think about something, but instead having hallucinations in the place of just thought.
Well,
Um,
you get to control it. You get to decide what you're thinking of. Like, think of a banana, and you get to. For anybody listening that hasn't heard us talk about it, I too have what Jeremy has. I think I have. There's like a scale to 5, and sometimes I think I have the one where you can see like outlines ish. Because sometimes I think I'm seeing something, but for the most part, I'm pretty sure I am aphantasic, and also I go back and forth on if I think everybody else is making it up. I don't know if I trust this to be a real thing, that people can see things in their head.
so
Somebody's asking if we dream. I don't know about you, but I dream in perfect, vivid imagery.
yeah, I'm pretty
Do
sure that
you?
I do too. But I'm pretty sure that I do, but because memory is the class of these thoughts that don't have sensory stimulate, right? It's not just when I'm it's not just when I'm imagining something new or abstract that I don't have sense data like things, but it's my memories too. My memories are, factual, descriptive. They don't have sense data. So I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that I do have sense data in my dreams, but my knowledge of that fact is kind of abstract, and like I'm not able to sense the dream afterwards, right? Like remembering it. It's just
Well,
a,
so yeah,
it's
so
like a
I
factual
like
memory of what I dreamed.
yeah, like if I were to close my eyes right now and think of like going and like hugging my wife or something. I get no image, but I can just think of the idea of it. But if I wake up from a dream where I had just hugged her,
Mhm.
that was a real thing that like my memory is of a vivid action. Like
Yeah.
yeah, so it's kind of hard to explain, but
I
yes,
think I'm like that too. And and I have experienced what I call hallucinations, what I think the term means to me, when I've had high fevers, um, and
Hmm.
maybe hypothetically in my younger days, there might be some experiences that might have given me hallucinations that I may or may not have partaken in.
Mm.
Um, so I know what I have a concept of what a hallucination is like. Uh, Sensory stimulus that's not produced by the external world in a kind of reliable way. That's kind of like fake perception or screwed
Mhm.
up perception. And I can like poke my eyes and like make stars appear or something like that, or like I just sneeze really hard and see stars.
Mm.
I know what that kind of thing is, but those aren't thoughts, right? That's not, like I said, it seems like a category error to have thinking about something or remembering something,
Mhm. Yeah,
those kind of hallucinations.
one thing that's interesting is that we take the word of others for it. Maybe it needs to be a certain amount of people, but like imagine if like you grow up in a town and every person you've ever met has what we have. And then you meet one person that says, oh, when I close my eyes and picture something, I see it perfectly. We would probably just think they're crazy. But because there have
Right.
been studies of sorts, which are just going to be people saying what they see, and there's 97% of people seem to be able to have a mind's
Right.
eye, I believe is what it's referred to. We accept it. Not that we shouldn't. It's kind of interesting what leads us to view something as likely true.
Yeah, so that's why I wanted to bring it up, because I see status quo bias in almost everything we deal with in applied ethics, especially when it comes to issues related to veganism and who counts as a moral patient, and to what extent they do, and what role we ought to think we current humans at this point in history bear within the actual historical and potential future spectrum of consciousnesses. But when we talk about what we value, like what aspects of sentient experience or consciousness we ought to value, or you and I, weird Western educated industrial people do tend to value, or what humanity more broadly tends to value. There seems to be this major role of status quo bias, and part of me wants to just reject it, like as I do in a lot of other contexts, and just say I want to fight against status quo bias. But then, it's it's hard for me to think about treating somebody being aphantasic rather than phantasic the same way I think about somebody being blind rather than sighted, or somebody like having to eat food just kind of abstractly knowing that it's healthy or nutritious, but lacking any sort of taste pleasure. as like the summary of that.
That's funny.
That
how
seems
I intend
pretty
to
bad.
eat.
Well, yeah, you don't want to be responding to taste for various like practical instrumental purposes of maximizing your health, right? But if you something that is healthy for you, a blueberry or whatever, and then that good taste was somehow transformed into like a information on a spreadsheet as you ate the blueberry. But there wasn't that summation of it that natural selection has produced in us that we call taste pleasure. That seems like it would be a moral loss, right? But if somebody, just you and me, lacking some kind of parallel pleasure response, like say like we just, I don't know, we file our taxes. I don't have to do it in Korea, but we do something that we need to do. Okay, we clean the bathroom. I just did today. We clean the bathroom and we want to do it instrumentally because we get satisfaction from the result, right? But it's hard to think about our not having like intrinsic pleasure from the act of cleaning the bathroom be a loss compared to some hypothetical person who gets some kind of direct feedback of like joy from the process of cleaning the bathroom. Like that would be equivalent to somebody losing their losing their taste pleasure in eating certain kinds of nutritious food. Does it
Yeah,
make
I
sense?
guess.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of think of it like right now, I don't hate that I can't fly because I don't think humans can fly. Um, but if I were to imagine a world where every human can fly and then I couldn't, then it it would
mhm,
have this feeling of like, oh, kind of like being blind when everybody else can
mhm.
see. And yeah, yeah. It's yeah. No, well, real quick, I just want to verify. When you said that you wouldn't want to be able to see with the mind's eye, as people refer to it,
Mhm.
um, do you think you would feel the same way if you were born blind? And would you think like, oh, I don't want to see, I'm fine with this? Or is it just the mind's eye thing?
Yeah, that's the kind of question that's perplexing, you know. I mean, clearly being blind has a lot of instrumental negatives, very, very severe ones, right?
Hmm.
Crippling ones in like nearly all contexts that humans have been in throughout history and including the present day. You know, it's really it takes a very high level of social organization and technology to make, you know, fully or profoundly blind people functional. Um, so there's that part, but you know, assuming that like a context where that's taken care of, just like the direct value that I attach to being able to perceive things by sight. Um, it's really hard for me to say.
I guess you'd have to
With the status
experience
quo,
it.
my status quo were the opposite.
Hmm. Yeah, like if there's something you've never experienced it at all, and somebody says, would you like this? It's kind of impossible to say yes, you do. You'd say, well, let me see what that's like. And then you see what it's like, and then you go
Mhm.
like, oh, this makes me feel good, or this doesn't make me feel good. But if you
Yeah,
just have
but then
no clue, then you couldn't know like if you didn't have legs or sight, and then somebody said, do you want to have legs? You'd go like, well, I don't know what you mean. I don't know what
mm,
this is. You can describe to me what's happening, but it probably would just sound
does
ridiculous.
even then the process of experiencing it, gaining it, is also making you a different person. It's making you a different assessor of
Well,
it's
then you just decide if
a
you just
different
decide if you
who that
like that
likes it or
thing.
doesn't like it, right?
Yeah. I
So
don't know if it makes you a different who. I mean, maybe. So yeah, if I didn't have legs or sight and then I was given legs or and sight, and then I take a few steps, I open my eyes, look around. If I'm feeling like, oh, this is much better, this feels like I wish I've always had this, then I'd go, awesome, awesome. Okay, this is good. But then if I randomly, somebody's all like, oh, do you want like a penis on your forehead? And then I'm like, I don't know, what's that like? And then they put it on there, and then I hang out in life with it, and I go, oh, this isn't giving me anything extra. Like, go ahead and remove that. Um, Now, again, I don't know. There can be a lot of different things we can add. We can say like, oh, do you want your head to be twice the size? And I don't know. Try it out. And then I don't know if that makes you a different person, but maybe I'm not fully understanding that.
well, you know, Travis Travis Talks, he mentioned this paper that was talking about um, what people consider like desirable or undesirable hypothetical changes to themselves, right? And I think the joke that it starts out with is called like the spinach joke. I think it might be spinach or broccoli or something like that. But it's basically a child saying something like, uh, "I I sure wouldn't want spinach to start tasting good to me because then I'd eat it and it's gross." Right? Something along those lines, right? and that's supposed to be an absurd joke, but then this was used in like an ethical argument that we don't think about something like being racist the same way. Like, it's not a joke, or it's not absurd to say, I hope that I don't change to become racist, because then I will do all these racist behaviors and they are wrong. So I don't want future changed me to be doing those things, right? That's not absurd at all. And there seems to be like a gradation of examples that are between the two, right? But it seems to be an idea of like what
why is it not absurd?
Why is it not absurd to say, well, I would say as a consequentialist, it's not absurd because my current assessment of whether it's good to be racist, it isn't an analysis of whether my actions are consistent with my own motivations, but it's an analysis of the predictable effects on the world of the behaviors. So
but it's only based on your current, similar to the spinach. If you woke up tomorrow, then the thought that you hope you don't would only be if you are objectively right about your view of morality now. Where if your view of morality tomorrow when you wake up was to be racist,
that guy wouldn't have the same judgment, sure. But the point of that contrast is that I right now don't care about, mostly don't care whether the year later version of me has pretty different taste preferences. As long as he can get those taste preferences met, that seems like a change that sure, it's changing some aspect of me, the being, but it's to my subjectivist, I guess, moral appraisal, is just as good if that guy likes different hot sauces, and he likes different fruits and stuff, different coffee blends. I don't know. It doesn't matter at all. Like, okay, I might change that in those sorts of respects. That life, that slice of this longer strand that's vaguely the person Jeremy Goard, is going to be just as good after those changes. But when it comes to my moral judgments that affect others, I feel an interest in having different future Jeremys come to pass or not come to pass, right? I don't want the potential racist change to happen, right? Because what's valuable there is what's important there is the effects on the world, and I want the self to be changed in a way that causes more harm in the world. I want the opposite. I want future slices of Jeremy to be doing even better for the world, right? So, but that's talking about effects on other beings, that dimension of morality. But to kind of hone in more on just what aspects of sentience, human and non-human animals, and then potentially AI and aliens and whatever, are intrinsically valuable. It's interesting to keep an eye on the status quo and think about whether there seem to be asymmetries in my ground level intuition about whether it would be bad to lose some aspect of experience, or good to gain it if I never had it. And it seems like I want to agree with the axiom that of like reciprocity or symmetry. I want to agree with some kind of symmetry axiom that if it's bad to go from X to Y, then it's good to go from Y to X. Does that make sense? It seems like some kind of higher governing like aspect of my thinking about these issues that is uncomfortable with that sort of asymmetry. It's uncomfortable with saying like, oh, from the standpoint of someone who doesn't have, perfect pitch or whatever, doesn't have super musical ear. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter if I ever were to be able to gain that. Who cares? That's not needed for like a maximal flourishing life. That's pretty peripheral. But then at the same time, to think that if I had it, that something happening to me that made me lose it would be terrible. That doesn't seem like it ought to be right.
Yeah. Yeah. It does to me, but I haven't really thought it through too much. But yeah, if you experience something, I mean, I basically, it seems like almost everything that we think of has to do with pleasure or pain. So if something gives us pleasure that we experience, having that removed would be a bummer for sure. And then, but the idea of never having had it, you hadn't experienced that pleasure, therefore you don't have that strong desire to have the thing that you don't know if it would give you pleasure.
I mean, yeah, you'd have to kind of also lose the memory of it and the routines around it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a big reason why, it would be worse for us to go blind than for somebody who was born blind to stay blind is that they have grown up with all of these functional adaptations to that condition.
Yeah.
They know how to do all sorts of important things.
Well, and on top of that, they never on top of that, they never experienced the pleasure of it. You could imagine it.
Yeah, they don't have the memory.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So there's that. That's like a direct. I mean, it's like an instrumental, like second order or higher order consequence of having previously had sight. It's different from saying like snap your finger and make somebody who is sighted now like always have been blind, or do the opposite and make somebody who always has been blind like always have been sighted. And in that sort of thought experiment, it seems very problematic conceptually for me to say that there wouldn't be symmetry, that if one change is good, then the opposite direction of change wouldn't be equally as bad.
Huh. Okay. That's interesting. I'm going to be thinking about that for a while, but I'm going to switch over to something really quick, but on the same idea, I guess. Maybe one way we could look at it is if you start removing things from a human, so you take a human and you remove their ability to feel anything. So if they like touch something, they have no sense of the touch. And then you can remove their sight, you can remove their hearing. Like how many things must you remove before there's not something to value.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't seem to me from, I don't know how much of this is intuition, because I don't even remember what my intuition was like before I like knew anything at all about psychology and evidence, and the way our brains can be tricked, and our like the way our normal functioning does involve our brains kind of tricking themselves and altering what they directly take in from the environment, I guess. So I hear a lot of people say that consciousness has to be something that's either on or off. You know, that I think most recently I heard this YouTuber Emerson Green. He seems to really have this strong opinion that the lights have to be on or off, right? It doesn't make sense to talk about degrees of that. Like you can talk about, in his view, degrees about what a conscious being is able to do or what a non-conscious being is able to do, but whether there's consciousness or not, it's this binary choice, and that doesn't make sense to me at all. I don't understand why that would have to be the case. Like consciousness is just some. Even when you say just, there's like this slander of the concepts of physicalism. That's not warranted. I'm sorry. I'll get more to the point, but
yeah, okay.
I think there's not going to be a point where there's this like platonic, binary distinction that gets flipped from conscious to unconscious, or from what I would consider morally valuable experience to a lack of morally valuable experience. It is going to be gradual, and we have plenty of real examples of that gradual shift, in the form of all the different animal species, and then even to other information processing at the level of plants and fungi and machines, right? Where I think there's a gradual shift, and I say in vegan conversations all the time that I don't think the cognition of earthworms seems very morally valuable at all. Maybe very little. And also, I don't think that virtually any vegans act in accordance with thinking that there is either. And that it's kind of a lot of performative virtue signaling type of behavior when certain vegan activists, advocates will sort of say that every single animal has the equally as status as a moral patient. Their actions just like completely belie that, right? Like there's lots of examples, but which animals they rescue hens, and then they keep hens at the sanctuary, and they allow the hens to go out in the field and eat ants and earthworms, and it's just, and it seems absurd to people to even think of like rescuing the earthworms from the hen sanctuary to have a separate worm sanctuary. Because I think everybody just knows that there's just very, very little of, as far as we can tell, of the different things that we value.
Yeah, it's interesting how I guess some people evolve to want to be helpful to things that we think need help. And we can learn later if those things can suffer or not or whatever. But like you're saying about earthworms, I've learned somewhat recently that they likely have no ability to feel anything, which is what I mostly care about. But throughout my entire life, even when I wasn't vegan, if whenever it would rain a lot and worms would just be all over the asphalt, I would pick them up and put them in the dirt because I would feel
Yeah,
really bad for them. But I think it would be the same for
I've heard,
like
I do that too.
plants. If plants moved really fast in a way we could see, like how plants will like go toward the light. I don't know if you've ever had like a lavender plant like outside where depending on which direction the sun goes throughout summer, this lavender plant will
Mhm.
just like be shifted this way because it's not making
Yeah.
any conscious choices, but that's the way it's going. And I feel like if I was out on a hike and I set my backpack down or something, and I could witness this plant trying to shift around my backpack to be facing the sun or whatever, if I noticed it, my intuition would just tell me to move my backpack because it wants the sun. But if I think about like how many actions I am able to do in a day and what matters or doesn't matter, if I am
Mhm.
aware that that plant cannot feel any pleasure or pain or have any desire outside of its just existence to move toward the sun.
Yeah. So this is that status quo bias thing, when I think humans have a really strong tendency to sharply categorize like entities in the world into the conscious group and then the non-conscious group, whether it's like Descartes putting only humans in one group and thinking that dogs are basically just complex machines that don't feel anything when you kick them or dissect them or whatever, or the vegan position that puts all animals in that group and then everything else in the universe in the other group, or various points in between. um it seems like very very status quo and very like based upon where we happen to be located, kind of
Mm,
like parochial, because even thinking about our own bodies and brains, like what we know from centuries of science is that almost everything that's going on is not at this level of the PR person who's the consciousness. So if you're gonna talk about what these plants do and say, well, it's not conscious though, it's just kind of automatic, it may be really complex and you know and functional, but it's not conscious. Well, and virtually everything that's going on in this is like that, right?
mm.
The heart beating and the hemoglobin picking up iron and transmitting it, and everything that's going on in every single cell.
Yeah, I
And
think the
then
only difference is that the outcome, a negative an unwanted outcome, can feel unwanted. Like
yeah,
whereas like so a plant wants to go towards the sun. If somebody built a wall in front of the sun, the plant wouldn't be able to find the sun and it would die or whatever. But it would at no point think I don't like this outcome. And I think that might be the main difference because I've been
yeah.
thinking about that for the past week before this talk, and I was trying to think about it. It's like if the plant wants water, it wants the sun, it actually can move toward it. Like what is the difference between that and me wanting water or wanting and
Right.
the and like is there any reason to call the plant getting the sun pleasure? Probably not.
So what I what I think, from the physical physicalist position is basically that the kind of things that I care about in experience they're like a set of like complex summations of lots of perception and goals and accomplishment or frustration of goals, and not something like independent, not something metaphysically independent that could be either present or absent. Does that make sense? Like they're just the valuable states of sentience in humans and non-human animals and potentially other beings are just the high level perceptions and goals and like persons that have desires and attempt to fulfill those desires, persisting throughout time. Like that physical description of these complex cognitive processes just is what the valuable, the intrinsically valuable experience is.
And that's like the attempt to fulfill. I want to go over that real quick. Like, so let's say you imagine a human that couldn't feel pleasure or pain, like whatever the sensors are. So like they wouldn't know if they touched a stove that it was hot, but they would have to be told like, this is bad for your skin, so don't do it. I just lost it. What was the thing that you had just said about
what automatic processes within our bodies and brains?
There's something to the effect, like, so I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, so if there is zero pleasure and pain in a human, and the human has this something within them telling them to get to water, they need water, they thirst. What do you have to remove from the human sentience to make that thirst to make it the same as the plant's thirst?
I think something like something like having a self-reflective process that creates like a PR summary of what the company is doing. Something like that. Like having that persistent through time summary of the perceptions and the goals and the assessment of whether the goals are being fulfilled or frustrated. Something like that is what the best definition we have, or the best explanation we have of consciousness.
Can you imagine an animal that seems like every other animal, but that doesn't have that? Could that exist?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean,
what about insects?
Seems like, you know, like animatronic Disney statues or whatever, like that kind of seems like, but then when you look more closely inside, you very quickly see that there aren't the kind of parts that there are in real animals, right? So it seems like in that sense, sure, but
let's look at something like an ant.
Identical to, I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's metaphysically possible for something to be physically identical to something that has pleasure and pain, but not have pleasure and pain.
I'm not sure what current science says about sentience of ants, but I imagine that there could be something like an ant that would be just visually so different than a plant, but it really is doing the same thing, where it exists, it's made up of multiple parts, but it's moving because it has legs, and it has like it has a goal that it can't think about. Like the plant might have the goal to reach toward the sun in any way it can, and and even if it's bad for it, it'll do it. If you plant if you do like seedlings in your house to get ready for planting something, it'll the like tomatoes, it'll try to reach for the sun and go towards the window, and they'll get leggy, and then they'll fall over and die because they aren't able to think like, oh, I'll hold off until they set me outside, or I'll go slow because whatever. It's just that whatever within the plant draws itself towards the sun.
Well,
I
yeah, but
imagine
again, like
an insect, something that could be like an insect that is going to act like that.
Well, I think insects do act like that to a very large degree. I mean, and so do we. So that we need to, you need to be able to step back.
So what is it
to say that, like,
what
maybe
are the similar
most of what we do is like that tomato plant.
Yeah, no, and it might be most
and
of,
then a tiny bit of it has the kind of reflection to do the long-term planning and postpone things. But
yeah, definitely,
vast majority what we do, like you can't stop from sneezing when some black pepper goes in your nose because you think like it would be really inconvenient if I sneezed on this food that I'm cooking for several people. Like, I don't need to get this black pepper out of my nose right now. I could wait 2 seconds and turn around before I sneeze. We can't do that. Right?
Yeah. Well,
maybe you could train yourself to do that a little bit if you're like a chef and it happens all the time, maybe. But
yeah, I imagine if like 99% of us is like the plant, and then like if an ant is like 99.9% like the plant, I wonder if something like an ant can exist that is 100% like the plant. Or is the ability to have legs and move and all that make you must be, because there probably is an insect that isn't sentient, right?
I think so. Or such low sentience that it blends into the world of plants and fungi and machines, non-biological machines.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I'm very sympathetic to the idea that individual insects in social insect colonies are like analogous to groups of neurons in a brain, like a vertebrate's brain. So that the ants are doing this kind of local computation, but then they can't really accomplish any significant function alone. They work in large groups of ants, they leaving pheromone trails for each other, essentially forming the kind of nested groups that our neurons do in order to make our brains able to execute the complex functions. So
well, like imagine you have like you see 1,000 ants going in a line doing their thing, and you take one of those ants away, you put it in like a container, and we can solve for all of its nutrition needs and all that, but it's left in that container. And let's say that it's just on cycle, just walking around in that container, trying to sniff out the pheromones to get to the other ants. And it's just constantly magically fed and all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just imagine that it'll die of old age at some point, but it has a want to get back to what it was doing. But it never, like, not more of a want than the sun.
A metaphorical want, or
yeah,
because
like,
I'm sympathetic to the idea that would be taking that one ant out is similar to like to cutting out a really small local group of neurons in your brain, and then what your brain as a whole continues to do, and the person of you would be unchanged to any observer, but then there'd be like these neurons in a little petri dish firing off, and it's
but would there be a
totally
difference
plausible to me that
between
that
letting
group
that
of
ant?
neurons wouldn't have any significant sentience to speak of, and neither would the single ant. And so it's totally reasonable. I find it totally reasonable to describe sentience as a property of an ant colony,
Okay.
or subsets of an ant colony, as much as or more than of individual ants.
Well, they work together, but they can't think together, right?
I think that is probably just what thinking is. Yeah, sure they can think together.
Well, there can't be.
They do computational processes together. That's the only way they survive. They can't do it individually
They function together
any more than
sure.
like little clumps of neurons. Human neurons or chicken neurons can do it when they're not organized into a human or chicken brain.
Yeah, I mean, they function together, but obviously there can't be a collective consciousness where there's like
why not?
Like for example, like we don't know where our consciousness is, but we think of it somewhere along where like our eyesight is. Although I would assume it's more than that, because if I was born blind, I would still view the consciousness as being somewhere in my head. But anyways, it's not physical.
Why can't consciousness cross the boundary between physically discrete ants? There's space between our neurons.
I mean, I guess anything is possible. I wouldn't think that, because like who would be experiencing that thought of consciousness? Like it wouldn't be like, I guess they could each have
that is the
thought,
who.
but then, sorry,
who would be experiencing it? I mean,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't think
who just is the who just is the functional physical system doing complex computation, storing information.
But that's the thing. I don't know if they're storing information. I think they might have something like the plant where
they're not.
Where no,
ant colonies aren't storing information about where food sources are and how to get back to the colony and
storing information.
I mean, they're able to use things that have been experienced previously in the external world to solve tasks in consistent ways, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I guess it's tricky. So I don't know exactly how ants work, but I guess what I'm trying to look at is the possible hypothetical, the hypothetical of ants being as imagine ants right now are sentient. The hypothetical would be, can we picture ants that aren't sentient and that are essentially walking versions of plants?
Yeah, I don't think that sentience is a metaphysically separate thing that can be added or removed. I think it just is a description of certain kinds of stable computational organization.
Mm-hmm.
And how much of that is going on at the level of an individual ant, how much is going on with, say, groups of workers, how much is going on in an entire ant colony. Mm-hmm. I don't really know enough details about ants in particular, but I think whatever kind of relationship there could be between our groups of neurons and our entire brains and entire bodies, that relationship could, there's no reason why it couldn't exist between these biologically, like physically, like discrete walking ants and the larger ant colony.
Mm-hmm. I guess
I
I'm just
don't think
trying
there's
to.
something that could be taken out if it's in an individual ant. Whatever functional cognition there is in an individual ant is what it is, and whatever
Yeah.
much higher functional processes are in the colony rather than the individual ant, that's the description of the colony. And if what the colony is doing is conscious things,
yeah. Well, let me.
then I would say the colony is conscious. The colony is sentient.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to step away from that then. So like, if you, I don't know if you pick flowers, but like, imagine you saw a flower, you thought it was pretty, you wanted to pick it and walk around and stare at it. So you pick this flower, even though if you didn't pick it, it would keep trying to reach for the sun that day, and it might do a handful of things that are interesting. If you filmed it, you would see unique things happening. I'm just trying to imagine like a hypothetical insect, and there might be plenty. There might be hundreds of the different species of insects that are not sentient, but I'm trying to imagine an insect that if somebody just picked it up and squished it, that nothing is happening different from you picking that flower.
Yeah, I think that's if there's nothing physically, computationally different in the insect system than the flower, then there is no other metaphysical kind of thing that the insect could have that would make it different from the flower. It's not a light that can be on or off that's separate from the physical processes themselves. So,
and do you think the main thing is, so you have that insect that if somebody just picked up and squished it, now taking something out of existence is a lot different than making something suffer. But considering that it can't suffer, if you were to squish half of it or rip a leg off this insect, it means essentially nothing. Then I guess what I try to think of is, what would that insect need to make it become meaning something? And obviously there's pleasure and pain, but there's also this thing that's hard to figure out of like a will or a want. Like at what point do we know that there's a difference between a being thinking I can't wait to see tomorrow versus a being that has the natural instinct to survive an attack, which I don't know how often the survive of an attack is not different from the plant reaching for the sun.
Right. I definitely don't want to suggest that like I think I have this all figured out, or anybody does. This relationship between ethics, moral patienthood, and complex cognitive systems, but it may seem to people that the great humility is in thinking, well, we're so different from ants, despite our immense differences from ants. We're gonna open our minds to the possibility of the ant having sentience, a very different kind of sentience from us. But what takes even more humility, even though I think it's justified by science, but it's very counterintuitive, is to think that there is valuable sentience in the ant colony. That is a computational system that's really much more radically different from, mammalian brains or vertebrate brains. A brain that's distributed across all of these different little walking organisms that reproduces in a way such that each of these little pieces shares the exact same genetic material, but they're like physically discrete, somewhat interchangeable, and then they communicate together by leaving these trails instead of by like synaptic connections between neurons. Like that takes even more humility, that looking to functional complexity, and even though it's so immensely challenging to try to intuit an ant colony having sentience, kind of following the best evidence where it leads, and thinking that this super alien being called an ant colony, it probably is the thing that's most analogous to our brains than a single ant is.
Yeah, and you might be right. Like, so I can't comprehend that. I can imagine a colony together acting as an individual plant, like a flower might act. But the problem I have is that I can't imagine there being a thought amongst a group of separate individuals. And so, like, I guess I picture if you have the colony, and let's say a colony is 1,000 ants, like, what happens when you remove 90% of them or 50% of them? At what point is a conscious thought changing amongst the colony?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the question about the mammals' neurons, right?
Sure. Yeah.
What, just we
like,
have.
Do you think if you remove 90%
damage,
if you remove
how
90%
much brain damage
of that,
makes somebody a different person, right?
Yeah, right.
But
if you
basically
remove
that same question.
Yeah, I guess if you remove 90% of the ants and then you have something similar to brain damage to the colony, then you put
not
that
just
90,
remove, but like,
but and then you put the 90% back. I can't picture anything happening other than just a function of evolution. I can't picture there a thought process existing amongst the collection, but that's because I haven't experienced it. I haven't learned about the fact of the matter, if that is a fact of the matter. But yeah,
I mean,
it's wild.
we are collections. We are collections of, neuronal groups that are and made up of neurons that are, made up of various chemicals arranged in different ways, and all the other kind of cells in our body, and indeed, all the bacterial cells that they don't just digest our food, but they send signals that affect perception and behavior. The bacteria in our gut at any given time are giving all kinds of, signals controlling which foods we pursue and avoid.
Yeah.
Find delicious or nauseating. As we know, when we substantially change our diets, you've experienced this, right? Like substantial changes to your smell and taste perception.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah.
So
it's wild. It's hard. It's kind of hard to think about, but I will continue to think about it. I got a quick question for you. So we got about 10 minutes ish.
Okay. Yeah.
And This question is probably an unanswerable question, but let's imagine a human. They have no ability to feel any pleasure or pain, and then let's say that the answers to these questions are known. They're not just the person being weird. This is truly how their thought process is. If you ask them if they care if they live another minute, if they care they're alive in a minute, and they say, "Oh, I have no care of that. I could be dead or alive or whatever." And if
Mm.
you ask them like, "Do you want to die? Like, would you feel better if you were killed?" And they go like, "No, I have no interest in dying." But they also have zero care of a future if they imagine themselves a minute from now or a year from now, and like that they have no like will or goal or anything of continuing to exist. How would you describe whether it is
Mhm.
good or bad to, and let's ignore society, so you're just out in the wild, for that
Mhm.
for that person to be taken out, if they could just be snapped out of existence, and
Yeah. So
yeah, what's happening here?
here's the thing. So I mean, this gets right into like the physicalism dualism sort of debate. Verbal behavior like that, I think is it's a kind of behavior, and it's not a direct window into some like otherwise ineffable like the person's true experience or whatever. So if you have a person who's like exhibiting this verbal behavior of saying, I don't have any goals, I don't care whether I am alive or dead a minute from now,
Mhm.
that's their verbal behavior. What's their other behavior?
Mhm.
Are they going to a job every day and like clocking in and,
Mhm.
and like earning a living? Are
Well,
they
so there is no job,
are they
there's no
eating?
society.
Are they like nourishing their body with food
Mhm.
like you and I do? So they're doing all this other behavior that's indicative of a system that does have interests, does pursue things and avoid other things.
Mhm.
And then their verbal behavior subsystem is in conflict with these other systems. But um, I wouldn't think that the verbal system is some kind of privileged status in like reporting the quote unquote truth of what sort of system that
I
is.
meant to bake it
Because
into the hypothetical, but I might not have done well. So there is no verbal behavior that has any meaning here. Like you get to know, like you get to feel in their brain, and they don't have a will or want for any future. In the present, they will act as if anything does to exist, like so the eating and
yeah,
whatnot. There's no job, there's no society. This is just out in the wild. You just meet this human that you randomly know the same language as them, and you can see inside their brain and see that they're not just like you don't even have to have the conversation. You can just see inside their brain that, like, because I'm guessing most mammals and non-mammals have evolved in a way of um, the most important thing is to continue to not, aside from the malfunction of people wanting to end their own lives,
hmm
most mammals want to continue, and and I think that's an important factor into what we value. But I'm just trying to isolate this one case and look at
yeah,
the
and I
not
know
wanting to continue. What does that
this
mean?
this sounds really. I know this sounds really radical to
Okay.
people who aren't accustomed to it, and um, so I understand why just not hearing it, not hearing the message, but um, I I don't think it's metaphysically possible
Mm,
for a system like a human to be doing all of these goal pursuing, self preserving behaviors reliably, and while not having this um, not having this sentient experience of um, having goals or wanting something or caring about life and death. Like that subjectivity just is a correlate of all of the physical processes that are going on. So if all of their physical processes were identical, and now this isn't like there are people severely depressed or whatever who do some of the superficial behaviors that might fool others into thinking that they don't have that condition, but they, you know, their disability is not, it's not like dualistically completely removed from behavior. Like there's all sorts of other behaviors, all sorts of other measurable things, their brain and what their bodies are doing that differ from other people. So I don't think that this thing that you're describing in this thought experiment is a metaphysical piece that can be pulled out and plugged back in
with any hypothetical sentient being.
Yeah.
Essentially. Okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
I think it just is, if you observed that, if you had a person that you observed doing all like normal, pursuing food, eating it, pursuing mates, doing productive work, exchanging with others, socially interacting, and all of this stuff. I think it's just a mistake. It's a very fundamental mistake that, it has its roots in, we have this evolved natural kind of folk psychology that thinks of a spirit separate from the physical organism, but that's just it's just false. It's easy for our species to believe, and it's encouraged by a lot of cultural institutions, religious and otherwise. But I think dualism is false, and the sentient experiences of having goals, wanting to live rather than die, that just is a description of the complex self-preserving behaviors.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, I think that's a good point to stop this on. A lot for me to think about. That was a good talk. I really enjoyed it. I want to end with one last thing from chat in here, which is separate from the conversation we just ended on. Well, Phil's here and he says hi. And then a guy from earlier that was asking about the aphantasia said, "Are fictional books of no use to you? I just mean because you won't be able to imagine the environment." I've explained my thoughts on this a handful of times, but I'll just let you. I'll just let you explain your thoughts on that for you, and then we'll call it.
Well, yeah, I don't do what a lot of other people describe. And growing up as an aphantasic, when you hear people talk about getting lost in the world of a book, or when you see like these animated depictions of somebody reading and having these things pop out, it just you just assume. I mean, I just assumed that was a metaphor, and because of course when you're thinking about the story, when you're imagining the world, imagining isn't like having having sights and sounds. Imagining is thinking about something, which is this like abstract reflection on what the world is, the world of the story is. But yeah, we do have, like, there should have been these signs that I should have picked up on, right? Where people see see a filmed version of a novel and then say, that's not what Hermione looks like. That don't make any sense to me at all, because I never had a picture of Hermione from reading a book. And
Mm-hmm.
and so that so if I maybe been more aware of others, I would have picked up on these weird things that they were saying that didn't make any sense to me. In I'm a poet, and a poet, definitely poetry lover for my whole life. And when descriptions of the qualities of a good poem would come up in like literature textbooks, they would talk about, okay, rhyme and meter and alliteration and sound patterns and all this stuff that, yeah, I'm very familiar with. That's what I love in poetry. And then they would say, and imagery. They list that as like one of the characteristics of a good poem, imagery, like the use of words like raises images. And I was like, why is this stuck in here? What does this thing mean?
Gotcha. Yeah. Well,
But
yeah.
now I know.
Yeah. It's interesting for me. Like, I can imagine stuff very well without being able to picture it, but like it probably has to be something like something I've experienced. But like, if I'm reading a book and somebody gets punched, like, I'm not picturing a person and another person in a punch. I'm just like having that knowledge of, I've thrown a punch before, I've taken a punch before, and I've seen people get hit, and like, so I can feel that feeling of like,
Yeah.
this bad thing's happening without picturing an actual image in my head.
Yeah, picturing like the implications, right? We have like the thoughts about the physical, social implications for the characters, and we, desires and things like that, right? At that level.
Mhm.
But so if the book didn't say, but somebody punched somebody in a novel, and then somebody there with you in the room were to immediately ask you, did that guy throw the punch with his left hand or right hand? Would you just immediately be able to answer it, or does it just not make sense? It doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
No. It was no like physical punch with a particular arm. And what my brain would do is then just reason like, oh, do I think this character was right-handed? And then I'd like extrapolate, oh, right hand. But I wouldn't be answering about the punch the side that I imagined the punch coming from.
Yep. Yeah. Somebody put a comment in here. The problem with sentience is very arbitrary. You will hear about experience in quotes. Well, that does. Does that criteria need to be exactly? And if it's missing a few, and add a few criteria.
I mean, maybe I shouldn't, at least in the context of non-human animal advocacy, even really be talking about sentience as this thing that there either is or isn't. It's probably just better to say, I think the kind of things that definitely mammalian and bird brains, avian brains do are way more similar to what human brains do than they're typically given credit for. And also that sort of like on the spectrum of potential conscious systems, I'm frequently imagining the potential aliens, AI, ancient dragons, whatever, even just super augmented, humans, cyborgs or whatever. And I just see this spectrum of what intelligence, what computational systems, what consciousness can be. And then I see you and I being really, really close to a chicken within that range, if that makes sense. So when I'm saying like chickens are clearly sentient, I'm really not trying to talk about this this like metaphysical essence that is there and then isn't there in the earthworm or something like that. I'm just like, as physical systems that have the kind of pleasures and pains and social relationships and desires and frustrations and higher kind of affect, like fear, loneliness, and so forth. I think that these animals that I care about in that context are just very profoundly similar systems to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably a better way of putting it than trying to talk about this essence of sentience.
Yeah. No, that makes sense for sure. One last thing on the aphantasia thing. I think when I say that I wish I was able to picture things, I think one big reason, I mean, I would just like it in general. It sounds awesome. But I think it affects how I remember actual humans that are close to me or even not close to me. Like I will, because when people can like bring an image into their head of somebody that they know, if I see somebody that like I hadn't seen in like a year at a store or something, I'll go like, oh man, I'm about 99% sure that's them, but I'm not going to say hi because what if that's not them? Do you find that happening to you more so than you would guess it happens to other people?
Maybe.
Or like when you try to remember what a sibling of yours or your mom or something looks like, would you assume that you like forget more so than your average person?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, there's things like where freckles are on the faces of people who I know very, very well. Family members and really close friends. Eye color, There's this meme of, the bad boyfriend doesn't even know his girlfriend's eye color. But I would know my girlfriend's eye color, aside from the fact that like my last however many girlfriends have all been Korean and they all have like basically the same eye color, like super dark brown. But I would know it, but then I would be holding it as a fact, right? Not like it's not calling up an image of my girlfriend. So if I have friends like you whose eye color I don't particularly care about and it wasn't ever salient to me, then if somebody had asked me what Carson's eye color was, I wouldn't be confident.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh man, wild stuff. Okay, well, we better hop off of here. You got to get some sleep. But as always, it's great talking to you, man.
This is maybe one of the best talks. I feel like my brain is fresh. So
nice.
If you're okay at early Saturday morning, then late Saturday night is pretty good for me. I've usually just had a restful day and I'm not worried about working the following day.
Yeah, no, let's definitely do it. I always enjoy talking to you, and Saturday mornings are great for me. Alrighty. Have a good night, my friend.
Peace.
Peace.